Well, here at the Topher Project, I work very hard to help you to cut through the crap and make sense of the nonsense as the world changes around us. And one story that I want to go deep into, and we'll be doing in this interview with John Adams today, is the story of the 1975 pedophile tapes that were broadcast on our ABC at taxpayers' expense back in 1975. This might be a slightly longer interview than my normal because there's a lot going on here. Not just the fact that 50 years ago, our taxpayer-funded broadcaster was essentially advertising pedophilia. I'm not going to play the actual tape in this video. Those of you that want to find that, you'll find that on John Adams' page, Adams Economics. I'll put the link to that in the description. I won't be playing the tape in this interview, but it certainly amounts to advertising for pedophilia that was being broadcast on our national broadcaster. But then comes the cover-up. Not only the cover-up back in 1975, but what appears to me to be a cover-up that is enduring to this day. And in fact, it is only because of my guest today, John Adams' tenacity and curiosity, that this recording has even come to light, because the ABC have previously lied about it being destroyed when in fact it was not. This story is quite a rabbit hole, so buckle up, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of tea, and settle in for my guest today, John Adams. John, thank you for joining me here on the Topher Project.
Thank you, Topher.
Now, John, this is a story that for a lot of us, I mean, who are in this game, we're in political commentary, etc., we were aware that something had happened back in 1975, but the vast majority of Australians were not. That is a long time ago now. So can you tell us a little bit about 1975 era? What happened? What was broadcast? And why did it cause such a ripple? Why are we still talking about it 50 years later?
I would be happy to. Now, one thing I want to say, Topher, is that in your introduction, you said people in politics are actually aware of the 1975 tape. The reality is that most people are not aware, even in politics. And the only reason why I was able to learn about the tape was because Gerald Henderson wrote a number of newspaper columns for the Australian newspaper. And back in 2015, there was, I think I was just going through the Australian newspaper website, and I saw one of his columns. I decided to read it.
I'm sorry to interrupt my interview with John Adams. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and this is what I do. I bring you stories that matter with perspective that helps you to make sense of the nonsense and cut through the crap. This is an extended interview with John Adams, and the deeper down this rabbit hole we go, the crazier it does become. And the tragedy is this is not just a historical issue of something that happened in 1975. What this points to are problems and crimes that are happening very much today, and victims that are still being created to this very day. We're going to get into more of that later in the interview. If you appreciate what I'm doing here at the Topher Project, as serious as this story is, and it kind of feels a bit weird for me to say, hey, help me to keep this going in a story like this, but I do need to say that because I do want to keep going and bring you stories like this one. You can support me a couple of ways. You can buy a coffee via the button that is at topherfield.net, or if you haven't checked out my books, DVDs and merch, you can do that. I have books on civil disobedience, good people break bad laws being a key slogan of mine, and that is exactly what John Adams has done in releasing this tape. There's also Good Christians Break Bad Laws. This is about the theology of civil disobedience. There's my DVD documentary of Battleground Melbourne, if you haven't seen that. And everything you buy, as well as my T-shirts and a range of designs in T-shirts and hoodies, everything you buy is going to support me as I keep the Topher Project going and keep bringing you vitally important, life-changing, really, Australia-changing stories like this one in this interview with John Adams.
And he refers to this 1975 tape about pedestry, and that was sort of interesting because I never had heard that before, and I didn't know what it really was about. And it sort of, that column stayed in the back of my mind for many years. And in 2023, I just decided to go and approach the ABC, and I said that there's a column here from 2015 that talks about this recording. Do you have it? And they said, we do. I said, may I have a copy? And they basically go to the archives department, sign a what they call a personal use release form, which is a series of legal conditions to get the tape. Pay some money, and then you get the tape. So I got the tape, and to be honest, I didn't actually understand. So even though there was a description in 2015 in a newspaper column about the tape, I didn't actually know what I was listening to, and I didn't actually understand the context of what was happening in terms of 1975. So it's only until you hear the tape do you actually understand that this is a very significant piece of media. It's probably the only recording in the mainstream media in Australian history where they're actively promoting pedophilia. And I remember the first time I heard this, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. So in the 1970s, there was a very big push around decriminalization of homosexuality, and mixed into that movement, which was obviously pushed by center-left individuals, was this push around pedophilia. There was lots of people across the Western world, US, UK, Australia, that was trying to normalize pedophilia as part of this gay rights movement. And this recording by the ABC, Richard Neville, and I should say that Richard Neville wrote a book in 1970 called Power Play, in which he also admitted having sex with an underage girl in the UK. He was in his late 20s. She was about 14. So he basically was on the record saying that he engaged in pedophilia himself. And so it just so happened that that he went on to promote this concept through this radio interview. And what was happening in New South Wales in particular was a chronic pedophile network that was spanning all the way from Newcastle through the Sydney through to Wollongong. So for those that don't know who I am, so I actually live in Wollongong, and one of the most notorious pedophiles in the state's history actually comes from Wollongong. It's a guy called Tony Bevan. He was the Wollongong Lord Mayor in the 1960s. And then one of his successors was a guy called Frank Arkell, who was the Lord Mayor from, I think, 1973 through to 1991. He was also a pedophile, but the Woodrow Commission that happened in the 1990s mentioned Bevan, and they named a number of pedophiles, but they mentioned Bevan as they referred to him as evil because he was not just a pedophile, he was a pimp. So you had this massive criminal network across the state that was actually engaging in pedophilia. And for those that have heard this famous speech by Senator Heffernan in 2015, talking about cover-ups in terms of judges and lawyers and politicians, etc., he made a reference to a boy brothel called Costello's. So you had this massive network of pedophilia happening across New South Wales. You had this boy brothel in terms of Costello's. You had the police taking money to protect pedophilia, and this was in fact established in the Woodrow Commission. So you had a lot of people doing a lot of really evil stuff in the 1970s, and some of it was for pleasure, some of it was pushing a political agenda, particularly around homosexual rights, and then obviously in that context we have this recording that happened in the 14th of July 1975 that was hosted by Richard Neville and three pedophiles and a teenager, and in that recording they basically describe what they do, why they do it, how they do it, and it is the most explicit description of pedophilia in terms of Australian history, and so after I obtained the recording, and I thought about there'd be a right time to release it, and particularly in the context of the Epstein files, and how you've got and obviously Jimmy Savile, BBC, and you have this all of these scandals around elite pedophilia around the world, and that narrative has really taken hold in Western countries that there is something nefarious going on at the top end of society, particularly with children. So I thought, given that context, 2025 is probably the right time to talk about the tape. And we started talking about it about a month ago on my YouTube channel, which is called In the Interest of the People.
So this is something that I've heard a lot in my time as a political commentator. I've been doing this for 16 years, and throughout that time I've had people continuously coming to me saying, why don't you talk about the pedophiles that are really running the world and running the country? And I've got to admit, it's something that I've brushed to one side. It just seemed, it didn't seem credible. It didn't seem like it could have much real substance to it. And yes, are there individuals who are pedophiles? Of course there are. Unfortunately, that is true. And are some of those people in positions of power? Yes, of course, some of them are. But the idea that there was some sort of a coordinated effort just seemed too outlandish to me. But I have to eat my hat here and say, well, what's been revealed from these 1975 tapes and what I've now come to understand, what came out of the Wood Royal Commission and what we're coming to understand now, as you mentioned, the Epstein situation and so much more, it really does seem that even to this day, pedophilia runs a lot deeper in high society and amongst people in positions of power than what most of us, including people like myself who do try to pay attention to the world, what most of us have previously recognized. One of the things that concerns me that's really come out in your work as you've begun to talk about this is the apparent attempt by the ABC. We don't have certainty yet as to whether this was done in ignorance or whether this was a malicious attempt, but to deny the existence of the tape. They did this repeatedly. Can you give us a bit of the background in relation to the ABC and their statements in history around their claims of whether this tape even still existed?
Sure. So you have a series of statements that happened in 1975, and then you had some activity in the Australian Senate in 2016 and 2018 by Senator Betts. So last week, here's a big revelation that really shocked me last week. So if your audience doesn't know, I published the tape on my we started off on YouTube on the 13th of October, which was 2 Mondays ago. And then within 4 hours, the tape was taken off YouTube. So I reposted the whole recording on X. And we've had over 230,000 views on X. So people can go look, and they can look at it there. But in the subsequent days, Gerald Henderson contacted me, and we had a couple of phone calls. And obviously, as I said before, the how did I learn about the tape is through one of his columns. And he shocked me, and he said he never heard the tape. And I said to him, well, Gerard, you've been writing about this for 15 years. How is it possible you never heard the tape and you've been writing about this? So, he said he based his columns on newspaper articles. And one of the reasons why he said to me that he never chased the tape was because in 1975, the ABC said publicly that the tape had been destroyed. So I thought that was quite extraordinary. And again, to be completely upfront, I haven't found any specific source or reference to that claim that the tape had been destroyed in 1975, but that's what Henderson tells me. Now, the Betts situation in 2016, 2018 came from Gerald Henderson, so he provided a file of newspaper clippings about this issue to Erica Betts, and Erica Betts asked some questions in 2016 and 2018. Now, the reason why I'm confident this is not an accident about what the ABC did with the Parliament was because in 2016, Erica Betts asked the ABC point blank, would they be prepared to offer the Australian people an apology for promoting pedophilia on the radio? And they basically said on the record they do not apologize for the broadcasts. And that was a response to a question on notice back in 2016. And then when there were further questions in 2018, the ABC said, quote, the ABC has no record of the interview. And it's like, well, how could there be no record of the interview when I was able to get the tape from the ABC? Now, in the last fortnight, this issue has been raised again in the Australian Parliament by Senator Malcolm Roberts. And the new managing director basically said he doesn't know how the incorrect response was provided to Parliament in 2018 in terms of that there's no record of the interview. But he basically he wrote a new letter to Parliament saying that the official position is that the ABC does have the tape. So in 2025 they admitted they did have the tape, and that was only after I was able to write to the federal minister, basically saying that the ABC had engaged in a deliberate cover-up of the whole situation. And Parliament now has been correctly informed. However, Topher, if I or you lied to Parliament or to the police or to the courts, we'd be in a lot of trouble. But when the ABC deliberately, doesn't apologize for promoting criminal misconduct and then lies about it, or they just say, "Oh well, sorry, it was some sort of clerical error." And that's why people have lost confidence in the mainstream media, because you see this double standard, you see a lack of accountability. People want the truth, and they don't feel that the mainstream media is giving them the truth, and that's why they come to listen to you. They come to listen to me, and obviously they're looking for people who they can trust. And the ABC on this occasion has again shown itself to be, not only, well, again, promoting criminal misconduct, promoting dangerous ideas in society, but obviously those people on that tape talking about pedophilia, those men, were evil monsters who created a whole bunch of victims across Sydney and in terms of other parts of New South Wales. And now, as we go forward, in the story is there's a hunt as to who are the people on the tape. I just had some communication with John Ruddock's office in the last couple of days, and they have received a email from a member of the public who says that he's a victim of pedophilia from the 1970s. He knows exactly who those individuals on the tape were.
Wow.
And that'll be interesting to see if we can identify those people. And obviously, now in relation to Fred Nile took a recording live on the 14th of July 1975. The following day, on the 15th of July, he provided a copy to the New South Wales Police. And we don't know exactly what the police did in 1975. So John Ruddock has written formally to the police minister several weeks ago, and we're waiting to see if we can get a response from the police to say, well, did they investigate? Did they not investigate? Were these predators taken off the streets? Or did the police allow these people to continue to roam around and cause more havoc?
Well, this is very much a developing story, but it is developing because of what you did in actually bringing this tape to light. Now, you mentioned earlier that in order to get the tape, you had to sign some conditions around personal use only, etc. Now, there was word that the ABC had actually, I'm led to believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, had essentially threatened legal action or sent a legal letter to you trying to get you to not release the tape publicly. And like you've said, it is available on your X account. I would suggest only those with strong stomachs go and check it out. I began to listen to it, and I had to turn it off after only a few minutes. There's certain things that I just don't need inside my head. So I'm very grateful that it's on the public record and that it's been revealed, but it's not recommended listening, to be quite honest. But it's such an important thing that you've done. And it seems to me, if my information is correct, the ABC actually tried to threaten you out of publicly revealing this tape that they had claimed didn't exist.
Yes. So what happened was, 24 hours prior to publication, so on the 12th of October, I put out a statement on social media saying that that I was going to break the legal agreement with the ABC and actually publish the tape, and we were going to publish it at 5 o'clock on the 13th of October. And then basically, with our recording, Martin North, my co-host, and we did a 5-minute sort of introduction to the recording. And then he prepackaged it up. We uploaded it into YouTube, and at 4:58 on Monday, the 13th of October, so I'm literally in the car driving to pick up my daughter from her dance class, and I get a text message from a lawyer at the ABC saying, "Please refer to our email that we've just sent to you," like literally with 120 seconds left to go on the clock. And so now I had no physical capacity to respond to the email or to stop the publication of the tape. And my co-host, who lives in England, he literally was walking the dogs in the morning, so he wasn't anywhere near his computer. So that's why the tape went live. But basically, they said was that they own the copyright, which is factually true. They haven't given me consent to publish the tape, which is correct. And they said that I've signed a form agreeing that I would only use it in a personal capacity, which I did. And they said that if I breached the agreement, that this would be a very serious matter. They would seek injunctive relief through the courts, and they would have me face financial penalty for any costs or damages that were awarded, that were awarded against me in terms of any litigation. So I mean, a couple of points on that, Topher. The first thing is that if they were serious about an injunction, why write to me with 120 seconds to go on the clock? They could have went on Monday morning to the court, and they could have, sent me a formal letter saying, well, we're seeking a court injunction. Don't do anything because this matters now before the courts. So they never did that. Now, at this point, now that the genie's out of the bag, and so while we have published it in terms of various forums, a lot of people have now copied the tape that people have put on Rumble and BitChute. People have put parts of the tape on Instagram, etc. So it's out there now. So my view is that there's no need for injunctive relief because what's the injunction going to achieve? So basically, I don't see any possibility of in some form of injunctive relief by the ABC. Now, if the ABC want to, the ABC may have a course of action if they want to sue me for breach of copyright. But on the other hand, they said on the public record that the tape doesn't meet current editorial standards, and basically they were never going to use the tape again. So I don't think that the ABC can claim loss of financial revenue or in terms of financial loss. So generally when you breach copyright and you seek to sue, you're suing because someone's made money off your work. Well, one, we didn't make any money off the work. Two, we said publicly we released this because this was important to advance the public interest.
It is in the public interest, absolutely.
And in terms of the third element is I don't see how the ABC can claim they've lost any money in this action. So even though I received this legal threat, all I can say is it's been more than a week and a half, and I have yet to hear anything further from the lawyers of the ABC or any independent counsel representing the ABC. So now. It is possible they still bring some sort of legal action against me.
Sure.
But one of the topics, Topher, that I think has really gripped a lot of Australians, particularly in the post-COVID era, is corruption. When you start to look at what are the main topics that people are concerned about, and whether you look at published polls, if you look at surveys, for example, the Australian National University or other published polls, trust in government is at record lows. Trust in the media, trust in big business, trust in the ruling elite has collapsed. And so you have this, you have this formal data. And then when I talk to people informally, a lot of people think that we have entrenched corruption in Australia, and that we don't actually have, even though we have a democracy, we don't actually have the ability to influence public events. And because a lot of people are frustrated with this whole situation, so just to give you an audience a bit of a sense, so once we did our first show in our new season on YouTube, and our first episode was called Australia's Secret Pedophile Tape, I had actually asked the ABC in an email, would they release me from the conditions I signed? They said no. Then so under federal law, the Federal Minister for Communication has the legal power to direct the ABC to publish content on their digital platforms if it's in the national interest. So I wrote a formal letter to the minister, and I encouraged my audience members to write to the minister as well. Within a few weeks, she wrote back and basically saying that she would not intervene because she respects the independence of the ABC. So having gone through this process and just basically getting roadblock after roadblock, and basically, whether it's Parliament or look in terms of the minister or the ABC, the real intent of what they wanted was just to keep this piece of history buried and for the public not to be informed about what the real agenda is all about. And so because I genuinely believe that corruption is all happening right throughout the government. And when I say that as as a former public servant, as someone who's served in federal parliament as an economic advisor. So I'm not someone from the outside throwing glass, throwing stones on the inside. I've been inside the system. I know a lot of the characters. I know that our political system's not working. And part of it is incompetence. Part of it is politicians out of touch. But you do have a massive amount of corruption happening inside the government as well. And because I can see this in real time, I just said to my I just got frustrated. I just said to Martin, we're going to publish the tape, and whatever the consequences is, I'll face them on the other side. And here we are.
It's an extraordinary story, and you have done an enormous public service, and I thank you for it. It's been done at considerable risk to yourself, as you say. There may yet be some legal repercussions, but I can tell you that I won't be the only one, but I certainly will be making a lot of noise about it if the ABC chooses to spend our taxpayers' money on lawyers trying to pursue you for releasing something which they so obviously tried to cover up. And I think there's two big stories here for me. One is obviously the fact that it happened in the first place, and that particular social movement, that particular social moment was on the back of the sexual revolution, the late 1960s and into the 70s, the rejection of the social conservatism and the nuclear family values of the late 1940s and the 1950s, the immediate post-war years. And people really were pushing boundaries and trying to promote every single possible agenda. And unfortunately, as you've revealed from these 1975 tapes, pushing pedophilia along with everything else. But more recently is this cover-up. And 40 years later, in the 2010s, for the ABC to be stating that the tape doesn't exist, 40 years later, or to say that it's not in the public interest. Why not 40 years later? Surely we can have a conversation. Now it's 50 years later, as you've done what you've done today and this month, and surely we can have an honest conversation about what happened. And yet it seems that that's still not possible. So, John, you've got a couple of things in the works. You're waiting on responses from the New South Wales Police regarding what happened back in 1975. You are waiting on, I'm guessing, John Ruddock MP's office regarding this individual who claims to know the identity of the people in the tape. And you're waiting on the ABC to see what they're going to do. What do you see as the next steps coming out of this? What do you hope to see, and what were you hoping to accomplish by putting this tape out into the public the way that you did?
Well, okay, so I mean, very interesting question in terms of what was my objective. Now, Topher, I find it instructive that you said that you could only listen to a few minutes, but you couldn't go any further. My strong position is this: is that if you want to conquer evil, you need to be able to understand what it is, and you need to actually understand who those individuals are that commit that evil, so that you can fully understand, the practice, the risk, and then obviously try to mitigate it. So Australia has had a massive problem with pedophilia going back some time, and pedophilia is not a historical issue. I mean, in terms of, for example, in terms of the last, say, 12 months, we've seen a state MP in New South Wales being convicted for rape. So that's Gareth Ward MP, former member for Kiama, and that's someone who I actually know. When I first got into politics back in 2005, I joined the Liberal Party at the University of Wollongong, and one of the people who was there on the day that I joined, and he helped me join, was Gareth Ward. So I know about him and his history. And then you've got the former member for Pittwater, who's also been charged for pedophilia, someone called Rory Amon. So while this tape represents a situation from the 1970s, there is a story that's been brewing in New South Wales for the last 10, 15 years. Some of it's on the public record, like Gareth Ward and Rory Amon, but then there's a whole other story that I've been told by multiple people that speaks to a morally corrupt political organization in the Liberal Party, but also, I would say, systemic corruption. So now, that other story, I haven't said anything publicly yet. Obviously, that comes with a lot more defamation risk, because we're talking about people who are alive, who have done certain things over the last 10, 15 years. And it talks about using sex as a political weapon, using it as a form of control in terms of being able to, initiate people into a political process and then to control them for the rest of their political career. So we're talking about some really dark stuff historically and also contemporary. And my strong view is that you've got to hear it to actually understand what you're dealing with is, whether it's for me but obviously now that hundreds of thousands of people have listened to it, a lot of feedback I have received is people didn't understand the depths of the problem until they actually hear these people boasting about raping a 3-year-old boy, and the fact that anyone could do that, number one, but then to put it on the public airwaves. I mean, again, for example, only in the last few weeks when I was in federal parliament, I played it for Malcolm Roberts, He said to me, he would not have believed the story if he couldn't hear it with his own ears. And you know, and now that, because again, whether it's the Heffernan allegations or Fiona Barnett or some of these other allegations that have been swirling around for the last 20, 30 years, and even if you go back, Topher, to the 1970s, so there's a documentary maker who's making a documentary in New South Wales about the pedophile stories from the 1970s, and he's interviewed about 40 victims, 25 on camera, and he said to me that even back in the 70s, people didn't believe in terms of what the victims were saying then, and then in terms of the current time, people say there's a lack of evidence. You know, people have different motivations for making these allegations. So there's always a reason why you can't actually believe it, and that these allegations are not true or they should be dismissed. But this tape is so damaging because it's a confession on the record, and there is no conspiracy theory. They openly say it on the ABC airwaves, and I think this is a significant cultural moment, because the establishment can never put these allegations back in the box, because again, it is just so open, that it is undeniable what happened 50 years ago.
Well, John, this is potentially the biggest story to break this year, and possibly even for even longer. It cuts to the very heart of who we are as a country and who we are as a society, what we will tolerate from a criminal point of view, but also what we will tolerate from our public servants, as you've so well articulated during this interview, the corruption, the cover-up, all of that. I want to say personally a huge thank you to you for the courage to put this out there the way that you have and take the risks, and give you my commitment for what it's worth, but I know there will be a lot of others as well, that should anyone come after you for what you've done, we will certainly be making sure that you have the best possible support and help in that fight, because I think you've done an enormous public service to Australia. So from me personally, and I'm sure from all of my viewers as well, I want to thank you for what you've done, and thank you for telling us your story here on the Topher Project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. That was my interview with John Adams of Adams Economics. I'll put some links into the description of this video so you can find him and follow his work. As he said, it is important for people to know what's in these tapes. I find it very difficult to stomach. There are things that I don't want in my head. I've got young children of my own, and the thought that there are people that can do that to their fellow human beings is almost beyond me. However, I think John has done a very important thing by releasing what he has, and he's right. We do need to face evil, and in order to understand it and be able to stamp it out and to recognize that this isn't just a historical issue. This is still going on to this day. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I'm 100% viewer supported. So if you appreciate that there is someone doing this kind of work and bringing these kinds of interviews, then please support me by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net, and also check out my books, DVDs, and merch at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Please like, comment, subscribe, and as always, think free.